Well, Mike, thank you for jumping in, joining us on a call today.
My pleasure.
As you know, I'm usually at Pie on a Plate talking everything BI, data, process analytics. Um,
Mm.
Reality is, though, I called you and was like, we need to have chats because the biggest thing, everyone, you go, what's your biggest reason BI is going to fail? Right? And everyone will be like crappy data, poor processes, whatever it might be, systems that kill us. The reality is, though, it's people. And it's this, I'm seeing this like sort of scary trend, I would say, amongst my network, personally and professionally, of people being at the mercy of others, or at the mercy of process or deadlines or emails. And it's creating this crazy pressure, stress, illness, you name it, is kind of what you're seeing as well.
Well, the way that I see it is that um, they're at the mercy of their inability to manage their own emotions.
Yep.
They're at the mercy of when they feel that pressure and that stress, they don't know what to do with it to make it effortless to take steps forward. And
Mm-hmm.
so what they do with it is what they've always done with it, which doesn't really work very often.
Yeah.
Is that what you're seeing in your network?
Yes, but I think the thing is when you said that, I was like, oh, it like hit me really hard in the chest because I have been there. I have been very close to throwing staplers across the room. And I think if that's not at the mercy of your own emotions and how you handle those situations, I'm not sure what is. So what I was hoping today was to talk through some super practical tips from you. And the reason I asked you to jump in, you and I have worked together. I'm going to say 2 years, but I might have been saying that for at least a year. So a few years. Do we just round?
I reckon it's just over 2 years now. I reckon
Oh, there you
it's
go.
it's just over that 2 year mark. Maybe it might be getting close to two and a half, somewhere in that
Yeah.
region.
Not that,
Hmm.
not that we're counting. But oh, it's always really hard when I say how does Mike help people? And I think the biggest thing for me that sets you apart from other businesses I've worked with and other people that I've worked with is that it's not just about sort of band-aiding with process. Like it's not this process of going, let's get a productivity system in, or let's manage this one difficult relationship that you have, or something like that. It's about diving deeper, as you said, into what, let's say, my reactions are to the environment around me, and getting to something that's sort of like more sustainable, changes the way that we think, changes the box that we put ourselves in. Um, and
Hmm.
I think that's what's really powerful around looking at how we can practically start to change how we work and how we thrive in these environments.
Yeah, a way of talking about it is that it starts with taking a viewpoint of extreme ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with taking the viewpoint that I create my own reality.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm experiencing something in my reality, the source of whatever I'm experiencing is me.
Yep.
And that by itself really can be really challenging to do because it's really easy to go, but they're pissing me off. it's
Yep.
it's their fault because they didn't do that and I'm angry. Um, Really all that is we're assigning blame. We're assigning cause over there. That a way that I find really helpful to look at it, and you and I've spoken about this for hours, is, well, if I feel something,
Mm-hmm.
it's my feeling. So it's within me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody else has done something and the result of that is that I feel something, all that's happened is they've done something that's triggered me. It's pushed a button within me.
Yep.
So how am I going to approach that? Well, I can be pissed off with them and attempt to get them to stop doing that, or I can attempt to no longer deal with them or no longer deal with that particular type of problem.
Yep.
But that doesn't actually fix the problem, does it?
No, no. And it's funny, actually, I was having a conversation with someone recently who had said, we were in a meeting and they were like, but I've got all these people coming at me. Like the phone was ringing, Teams was messaging, there was emails popping up and everything like that. And I think this is a really good example where I was like, they're not doing that to you. You're choosing to have those notifications on. You're choosing to see and respond to that. It could be water off. You know, there's people that are always calm. I remember I like even before working with you, I'd be like, these people kill me. Everything's blowing up in their face, and they're just sitting there calm, like nothing's going on. And that, I think that's what you're getting at when you say that, you know, you choose your own reality. It's not just what's going on, but how you're responding to it as well.
Yeah, it is. But it's also knowing that like a lot of people aren't aware that they're choosing that.
Yep.
And so
I wasn't,
you want,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. So the aim, and you know, we've talked a lot about your four invisible muscles, and the aim is to strengthen those invisible muscles. So those invisible muscles will determine your ability to take an observer's viewpoint of yourself and make decisions about how you're going to respond, right?
Yep.
So your four muscles are awareness, intention, interest, and attention. And
Yep.
as a general thing, the more you develop the first three, the more you're able to direct your attention to where you choose for it to go in any given moment.
Yep.
And attention is the thing that is the most divided for people right now. They're constantly, there's 50 million things going off all at the same time.
Yep. And I've certainly seen the stats, like goldfish outdo people at the moment with their attention span, which is scary when we think about it. And then the impact that has on us and the flow back in your point of how that can then just sort of create like a complete and constant level of strain sort of flowing underneath as our attention is pulled in every possible direction.
Yeah, things that would be important in certain moments where they are appropriate to be important. In other moments, those same things become distractions.
Yep.
Because they're actually taking your attention away from where you're choosing for it to go in that moment. And I think that what happens for a lot of people is they go through life and they go through the early stages of their career and social society, and they kind of get just into a loop of, well, this is what's normal. This is what everybody's doing. And this is okay. And they just keep going. And I don't want to talk too much about a lot of what you and I've talked about one-on-one, but it gets to a point where that becomes overwhelming. It becomes incredibly emotional and distracting, and the pressure builds up, and then overwhelm gets worse, and you hit a point of feeling like you've hit the wall.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I was in 2006. I'd hit the wall again.
Yeah.
I was 29 and going, I'm really disillusioned with life right now.
That was
Not an easy thing
very
to do.
outstanding with you. I'm very disillusioned with life. They were not the words that I was using when I was in that position, let me tell you. Mine were a little bit less PD. And like you're absolutely spot on. It becomes a thing though, I think, as well. And you mentioned before that to a certain degree, many people can't see that it's a choice, and many people can't see that it's something you can change. And I know that for me, it's something where a lot of these things are either accepted as a like an office norm, that this is the way it is when you work. Being successful is always difficult. Even I'm an emotional person. This is the way I am. This is how I was born this way. I've always been this way. This is how I react to things. And everyone's going to have different triggers that they feel that way about something, but it's still all of these beliefs that can be changed, I think, is really important.
Yeah, well, you even end up with ideas that you get from the people that you worked with and the teams you've been a part of for the first 5, 10, 15 years of your career.
Yep.
And a lot of those ideas, the way that they sound is, oh, hey, if you want to be successful, you have to do this. You know? If you want to have this life, you've got to make these sacrifices. And there's a cultural thing that happens in a lot of organizations and teams where that's the way that they think.
Mm-hmm.
And the jail that we live in day to day is made up of the beliefs that we've chosen, even though we may not be aware of them, the thoughts that we have, the ideas that we have. It's created by our own mind.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's not really taught many places how to go about, firstly, inspecting that in order to discover, well, what are the ideas that I have that don't serve me? What is the negative thinking that I go through that I'm not even aware of?
Yep.
And even if that was taught, it's certainly not taught how to go about changing it.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, that is where, as I said at the start, this is where you really set things differently, is that you go to change it at its core, not with, I guess, just pure behavioral changes, which is how most people attack the sorts of challenges we're talking about today. I am, though, going
Yeah.
to stop getting lost in that, because I know that everything we just talked about, you and I have literally talked about like almost every one of those sentences for hours on end over the past couple of years. And so what I'm really keen to do is to talk about, I guess, those steps that people can take to slowly sort of, or even just immediately dig away at some of that feeling that's going on. And look, I'll throw a couple of things out, and I'm thinking a lot about senior managers, executives, professionals that are sort of out there walking in. There's so many different situations I've been in. I've been in panic attacks walking to work. I've seen executives walk into meetings sort of like hunched over, going, "I'm going to get slammed today. This is where we're going." To just that, I've seen people bite other people's heads off just because they've walked out of a really stressful situation, and just that feeling of you can't get on top of it. And so I'm really keen to sort of hear from you. What would you recommend people do when you're just in this kind of, it's a never-ending slog going on? What do we do?
Yeah. Yep. I think, to me, there's one thing that stands above and beyond anything else that a person can do in order to be better able to manage that and better able to manage those situations. And I want to preface it because what I'm going to talk about is, or has been recently, kind of a hot topic, and people talk about it in a lot of different ways. So I want to talk about this in a really particular way. And the thing that is the most powerful performance tool that you have available to you is the way that you breathe. And I'm not talking about breath work. I'm not talking about like, let's go and do meditation for half an hour a day.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about, going to yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you finish your breath work or you finish your yoga or you finish your meditation, that's it. Now I'm into my day. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot and done a lot of work with what I call centered breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And a more technical term, or I say medically technical term that we could use, is diaphragmatic breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where you breathe to your belly, right down to the center of your body.
Yep.
Now, doing this is not about, like, again, it's not about meditation. So I don't want you sitting there going, let's be practical here. I want you to breathe the way you normally would.
Mm-hmm.
Just change where your breath goes, because I'll guarantee that anyone who's listening to this or anyone who's watching this video, when you're in those moments of stress, when you've just been smashed in a meeting, or when you're walking into a meeting and you know you're about to get smashed, or you're going into the office and you know that you have got an absolute pain in the ass day coming up, I will guarantee that your breathing is right up in your chest.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking really shallow breaths, your body's really tense, and that activates the fight, flight, faint, freeze mechanism in your body.
Yeah.
It doesn't help you. It activates your adrenal system. It makes the stress worse.
Yeah. And I think that's it's an interesting point, because if I'd showed up to you when I was in, one of these sort of horrific moments through my career, and you'd said to me, the number one thing you can do is breathe, I'm fairly sure I would be on an assault charge. For
I
sure.
know exactly what you would have done.
If not, there would have been some Italian hand signals, something could have been going on. It would not have been me breathing. And so I think what you're talking about in terms of, like, for me, I'm a very, very logical person. We're not talking about, like, well, it is kind of, I suppose, to calm you down, but for me, it's bigger than just calm you down. When you're stressed and they're like, breathe into a bag or something like that. It's bigger than that in my mind now. It's about just being completely present and in the moment and out of like a reactive mode. But simply breathing lower brings us back into a more present decision-making mode rather than that fight response.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You are letting your body know that you're here and this too shall pass, and I'm in control. And when you let your body know that, when you breathe that way, your body will automatically relax. And not only that, you'll also find that your mind stops racing so much. It's not in a panic looking to survive.
Yep.
And just doing that, just taking 5 seconds to just slow down for a moment, take a couple of breaths. And again, not big, huge breaths, just make sure your belly goes out when you breathe in. And then when you breathe out, your belly comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, it will instantly change the way that you feel. It will instantly calm whatever the emotion is. It will give you a greater ability to be an observer of yourself and choose what you want to do with those emotions.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's something here that's certainly difficult for me at the very start. I really struggled to be able to do that. So I think if someone's watching this and they're going, oh, it's just breathing, to give it a go. Because first of all, I think I spent a lot of time probably sucking in my belly. There's just one burger too many, I'm not sure. But that concept of breathing down, like I would have my hand on my stomach, below my belly button, deliberately pushing into it. And at the start, I was like, I wasn't even sure that I was breathing there. I wasn't sure if I was actually just using my stomach muscles to go in or out. And it does take practice. And I think people would probably underestimate how much we 24 hours a day are actually breathing into our chest.
Yeah, which means 24 hours a day, we're activating that fight, flight, faint, freeze response. We're activating our adrenals, and that really doesn't bode well,
Yeah.
neither emotionally nor physically for us. So, yeah, that's why I said early in the piece, this is not something that I recommend you do as like a once a day practice. So for me, this is a moment by moment, every day, every hour of every day, and every minute of every day, intentional awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So even while I'm talking to you right now, I'm ensuring I'm intentional about breathing to my center. And doing that, just it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
When you don't do that, then you have already to a degree activated that fight, flight, faint, freeze, which means that the moment that anything happens in your environment that presses a button within you, it's too late. You're already not present. So you're already at the effect of life, which means when that button gets pressed, you're biting, you're taking the bait.
I know what you're talking about. I would never have been in that position ever.
No,
I'm just,
no,
it's so,
no, no,
I'm pretty
no.
sure that was like every minute of like my in-office corporate career. I would say, you're just sitting in meetings and there's conversations going on and you can feel the things just triggering you. Sometimes it's tiny and sometimes, it's not tiny. But it's actually, once you start to put your attention on it, it's quite frequent. And it really does give you that ability to center. So I like it. I like it now. I don't know. I reckon if there's people out there and they're watching this and they're going, this is the most ridiculous thing. I'm not doing this. You're insane. I'm going to say you're the person that probably needs to do it most. Needs to, would benefit from.
It would be really helpful if you chose to actually just do it and experience it and see what happens for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's, I think I said to you 2.5 years ago, look, there's nothing that I'm gonna ever tell you that I want you to just believe because Mike said.
Yeah.
Like that's not okay. That doesn't work. And I would never want anybody listening to this to think the same.
Yeah.
Everything we've spoken about, all I've ever asked you to do is, well, look, let's do it and let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work through the process and let's see what happens, because it's not about you believing me. It's
Mm-hmm.
about you demonstrating to yourself, hey, you know what? That's valuable. That really worked. That really helped.
Yeah.
And it does. It makes a difference. But again, don't just blindly believe.
Give it a go.
Do it. Test it. Yeah,
Yeah.
do it and test it. And then when you do that, the other thing that's really important is to acknowledge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to implement any change in life, you know, change can happen with just a quick decision. And more often than not, change involves a process of implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, it involves making agreements with yourself, going and taking those actions, and then acknowledging yourself for doing what you said you would do before you do any form of evaluation on whether or not you did well.
I was going to say, so what are we talking with acknowledgements? I know how I do it, but are we going out buying coffees, doing things, celebrating?
But that's probably more of a celebration. And acknowledgement is different to that. So I'm going to geek out or nerd out for a second. I'm a definitions person. Definitions mean what they mean. And so to acknowledge something is to admit the existence of. So if you're going to acknowledge your effort, you're admitting the existence of your effort. You're admitting or you're confronting that you actually did the thing you said you would do.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of an acknowledgement is that it ends a cycle. So everything happens in cycles in life. Everything has a way that it works. And so in communication, we would open a cycle with a question. So if I ask you, is the sky blue?
Yes.
That cycle continues if you answer. So if you answer yes, you've continued the cycle. Well, if I want to end the cycle, I would acknowledge you and say thank you. And that's it. That conversation's over,
Yeah.
right? Well, what would happen if I did this? If I asked you, so is the sky blue?
Yes. So awkward. So awkward.
It feels weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right? It feels off. It feels like you know me, and you would have been sitting there questioning, well, hold on, what's he doing? Like, it feels strange when there's not an acknowledgement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, communication is a topic we can talk about all on its own, obviously, but the process of acknowledging, when
Mm-hmm.
you make an agreement with yourself to do something,
Mm-hmm.
once you've done it, if you don't acknowledge yourself, that same feeling happens.
And I think the really interesting thing there is when with the acknowledgement is just what was your definition again on that one?
To admit the existence of.
So it's not, is it good, is it bad? It's not evaluating, it's not celebrating. You said no coffees and cake for Kirsty for doing things. It is pies. It is straight up, I've done it. I did what I said I
Yeah,
would do.
that's all it is.
It is the
Yeah.
closeout acknowledgement. And that can be in anyone's own words, but it's that little moment in your mind where you go, I did that.
It can also be an action. So as an example, this is it's a way that a person can acknowledge is literally,
Mm-hmm.
I did what I said I would do.
Yep.
There's lots of different ways that you can do it. It's more about your intent,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens, a lot of people actually don't acknowledge themselves. And so they actually are looking for acknowledgement from external sources,
Mm-hmm.
right? there's a major problem with that, because that means that the way that they feel about themselves, they're actually giving the control of that to external sources in the hope that those external sources will acknowledge them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way that we really reduce our power. We really reduce the good feeling that we have with ourselves. Because the most important person to acknowledge you is you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the one who has made the agreements with yourself.
Yep.
Everybody else is secondary.
Couldn't agree more. And I think I can speak really personally to this one, because I still feel that starting acknowledgements for me, and I, like, you had me doing this at the most, I'm going to say, ridiculous detail, because it is a hard habit to get into. Well, it's not a hard habit. It's one that builds over time. It's not an instant habit. It's
Yeah.
not, I wake up in the day and I acknowledge everything I do that day. It's something that you work towards and you grow into a habit. And when you and I first started doing this, and I probably had, I think a lot of people would think of me as a reasonably confident person, but I was certainly lacking in self-esteem. And that's because all of that came for me from other people. And that becomes that's very difficult to sustain. It doesn't matter how well you do a job or, support your family. There's a million things you do a day that go unacknowledged for that one acknowledgement that you get. And so I think you had me acknowledging, like, brushing my teeth, which I'm very proud of. Like, I'm sure my dentist appreciated it. But it started this kind of snowball effect where the acknowledgements kind of grow. And then instead of looking at all of the things that haven't yet occurred, these sort of subjective things into the future, you've acknowledged all of the things that actually have happened. And that in itself can have a really profound impact on how you feel, your own esteem, your willingness to move forward onto the next topic or tackle the next task that you're looking at doing.
Yeah, definitely. So self-esteem is like a bank account. And so just like a bank account, there are deposits and there are withdrawals. So when it comes to your self-esteem bank account, the majority of the deposits are the acknowledgements. Now, that creates a problem if you don't acknowledge yourself, because then you're kind of just hoping and praying that other people deposit into your bank account, and then that doesn't go real well, right?
Yeah.
The other problem that exists is that if the deposits are the acknowledgements, the withdrawals that occur are when you criticize yourself, when you are negative towards yourself, and when you are unsupportive towards yourself, right? When you're critical, you're kicking your own ass, right?
Yep.
Now, here's where that becomes an even bigger problem. When you don't acknowledge yourself, how much more critical are you of yourself?
Oh, insanely. I don't even need to think about that one. I'm like straight in there. Just open the door and walk straight in, easily done.
Yeah. So we skip over the acknowledgement step, and we will therefore always see ways that we could have or should have done it faster, better, smarter, quicker, stronger. And so we instantly move into a criticism of ourselves, and we are withdrawing from that bank account. Those moments of stress, when you're walking into a meeting and you think you're about to get smashed, or you're walking out of a meeting and you just got smashed. Well, what I always aim for in anybody that we support is I aim for that person to get to a point where it doesn't matter what happens in their environment. They're choosing how they are behaving and responding and handling that moment. And the longer that somebody I've watched you do this, the longer that somebody spends time with us, the more able they become to handle any situation that happens in any moment in their life, without as much reaction and without going into survival mode.
Yes, which is a big one. And I think the interesting thing about that, in talking about that, ability to sort of have that choice and have that control, that acknowledgement that you do, it's not that you never evaluate after it. What I've found, though, is that when you do the acknowledgement, the evaluation becomes more balanced. So
Yes.
because there's that sort of, I did something that I committed I would do. And then there's
Mhm.
the what went well, what didn't go well, which is I think a really healthy thing to have, to make sure that you learn or take opportunities of things that go well into the future. However, when you don't acknowledge, I feel like you take the deficit of reviewing what didn't go well is much bigger, much longer, much more cyclical. You'll revisit it time and time again.
Mhm.
With the acknowledgement, it
Yep.
sort of, it enables you to sort of cut that and move on.
Yeah. I tend to think of it in terms of it enables you to then see it as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whereas if you don't do the acknowledgement step, then you are pissed off with how it is. It should be better. You're attempting to demand it to be different when it's not actually different. It is how it is. But
Yep.
you're stuck in all this emotion because you didn't acknowledge.
Yep.
So simple example. If I decide that I'm going to go and dig a hole tomorrow,
Yep.
all right, I'm going to go out and dig the hole. So I go and dig the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And once I've dug the hole, if I acknowledge myself, then I can go, yep, good, I dug the hole. Now let's evaluate. I wanted the hole to be 2 feet deep and 6 inches wide. Let's get the measuring tape out. Oh, okay, we're not quite at 2 feet deep. All right, no worries. Let's keep going. And it's just, it is what, right?
Yep.
But if I go out and dig the hole and I don't acknowledge myself and I get the measuring tape out, oh, for fuck's sake, it's only bloody 18 inches deep. Oh, you should have gone further before you measured. What are you doing? This is taking too long now. Why are
Mm-hmm.
you so useless?
Mm-hmm.
The negative thinking, the negative self talk, the criticism
Yep.
that we subject ourselves to,
Mm-hmm.
that's some of the worst things that we do to ourselves.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mm.
Interesting. So I'm feeling there's like almost a little story that we've got going on here, where we start with breathing, so that we are centered and present, which gives us the
Mm.
ability to have control and make a
Mm.
choice.
Yep.
We make that choice, decide what we're going to do, and then acknowledge it. I'm kind of just putting the pieces together. Fill in if I'm missing something here, but I feel like there's a real sort of pattern that we're naturally talking through, that's sort of going
Mm.
from that start moment all the way through. And that could be, you've received an email that's just been a massive trigger. Maybe someone's asked for something ridiculous. You have a choice to flick a filthy email back, or stop and breathe and decide what you're going to do about it.
Mm.
Make a decision.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't even reply at that point. Maybe that is the decision
Yeah.
you choose, and you acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
Maybe you let it go until tomorrow morning
Yep.
and you revisit it with a fresh set of eyes
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow morning and a night's sleep. And when you revisit it, you go, right, so what's actually being said here? Do I understand? What questions do I have? And what's the way I'm going to choose to respond?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of the things that I certainly recommend that everyone be aware of
Mm-hmm.
is your emotions are kind of like the gauges on the dashboard of your car.
Mm-hmm.
When you're driving into work or when you're driving away for a long weekend holiday, you're going to have an awareness of what the gauges on your dash are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
You'll know how much fuel there is. You'll see whether or not the engine temperature's nudging a bit too high. Um, and certainly, if the red check engine light flashes on, you're gonna notice that, and you're likely gonna pull over and turn the car off and go, okay, what do we do? How do we handle
Mm-hmm.
this? Who am I going to call, or do I have the tools to be able to deal with it? Right?
Yep.
If we're experiencing feelings like resentment, hostility,
Mm-hmm.
anger, fear of loss, separation, those feelings are, in many ways, that's like the red check engine light flashing at you on the dashboard of your car.
Mm-hmm.
It's an indicator that, hey, something's not right, something's not okay.
Yeah.
What happens for a lot of people is that they kind of just get used to the reactions that happen in life, and they go, hey, this is just normal. It doesn't have to be that way. If you know that you feel those, if you experience those types of emotions on a regular basis, hey, the red check engine light's talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do something about that. You know, you can change that. You can make that so that the red check engine light's no longer coming on every time you drive down the freeway.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people won't necessarily know or even see that that's possible because they're so used to being in the experience that they have of life. So I'll reiterate what I said earlier. The jail that we live in is created by our own minds.
Yep. And I think it's really important at this point to those reactions and those emotions are not who we are. It's what we're feeling. And I think that's a really big point. And that was something that I definitely didn't understand coming into working with you. That in my head was who I was. Of course, I'm going to react that way. Dad's a truck driver and mum's an accountant. Like, I think anyone that's spent more than 5 minutes with me can see where I come from, right? But I'd taken that and I'd put that into that's who I am. So I am going to be able to deal with the business problem, and I am going to easily get frustrated at things or annoyed by things, and take on my, stereotypical truck driving hat. But that's not the case. That is not the status quo that people need to live by. It is not this sort of need to be stressed to be successful. I'm in an executive position. That's why I get paid the big bucks. I want to just put it completely out there. People don't get paid the big bucks because they wear stress. People get paid the big bucks because of their capability. And you can have the two are not like complementary partners. You can be absolutely thriving, productive, and just living life in the best possible way and delivering awesome outcomes.
Yeah, 100%. That's absolutely true. And you're evidence of that. And anybody can. There's a framework, and if you understand this framework and you implement the framework, and we've touched on the first couple of aspects of that framework today, right?
Mm-hmm.
You understand the framework and you do the work to handle your own restrictive thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom that opens up to you is massive.
Yep. Completely.
I really hope that everybody who listens to this, I hope that it does even just one small thing to support you to handle some of those moments differently. I will make one point of importance, and that is, don't wait until you have the stressful moment to start breathing to your center.
Yep.
It's way more powerful if you're already breathing to your center and the stressful moment occurs. You're already ready for it. You're already centered. You're already there. You're present. And you're being an observer, and you can have more choice. But if you don't do it, well, then it will be more difficult to extricate yourself from the emotion that has just been activated by the stressful situation. And then you're dealing with that as well as attempting to, it's more difficult that way.
It absolutely is. And I once worked with an executive who in between every meeting would do a floor walk. And I think that if as you're building your breathing, like you said, we don't want to be yogaing for half an hour of the day and then not touching it again. Equally, at times, just staying in an environment, staying in front of a computer and finding your center can be a little bit difficult because that area is already surrounded by emails popping up at you and all of the types of things that are kind of causing you to be triggered in that point in time. And this executive between every meeting would get up from his desk and he would walk the floor. He would just walk in a circle around the floor, and his manner, people would be like, people will get me and talk to me and stuff. Nah, his manner told people, I'm with me And it was just that he wasn't looking around. He wasn't smiling at people. He was clearly deep in thought. And I think that thought was taking a breath. And so that before he walked into that meeting, he was centered and present regardless of whatever went on at the previous one. So there's many different ways that you can find, I think, physical triggers as you're starting out to help you as like a little pattern until it becomes something that's more natural, where you're centered breathing as just a natural course.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody wants to do any reading on this subject, you can Google diaphragmatic breathing. Wim Hof runs a course on breathing. He's known as the Iceman. Some of what he teaches is super valuable. If you want to take it to a level where you go and jump into ice baths or freezing cold water, that it will work. But centered breathing, in my opinion, if you can learn centered breathing first, the Wim Hof techniques and other things will be more helpful if you already know how to center your breath.
I would have really appreciated that before my Wim Hof following neighbour took me into the depths of South Australian waters and I nearly ended up with hypothermia. Mike, if there was a time where I was not centered breathing, let me tell you, it was the panic. She said she just looked at my face because I was not expecting it. And the panic must have been evident. Don't recommend doing that without some prep work first, just letting everyone know.
Yeah.
Nor do I recommend doing it with a friend where you sit, once you get used to the temperature, you stay in that little bit too long. Don't do that either. Just letting people know. No. But centered breathing would have really helped me there. I know we have just a couple of quick minutes, and I wanted to ask you one last thing, Mike, and that is that if I took myself back before we started working together, there would have been a lot going through mine, like a lot of objections, a lot of, but I've got to do all of this. I have to get that done. I've got this deadline. It'll all be better when I finish forecast, I finish budget, the auditors leave. Do you know what I mean? We bring in new team members because we're understaffed. There's this like real mix of just this huge workload that's on top of you, combined with this like magical hope for the future. And so for the people who are sitting in that world, that sort of overwhelm, so you sometimes you do sit and you breathe, and the next moment you're kind of back in that. Do you have any sort of suggestions as to how you can just start to break that cycle for those people that feel like there is no other choice? That isn't a decision for them at the moment. There's too much on.
Yeah. So that's a really difficult place to be, and the way to handle that, that's going to take us longer than a couple of minutes to talk about. But I would say that the first thing that I would do is recognize, again, we said this earlier, you create your own reality. So if you're having that reality, then and you're thinking, well, it's all going to be better when this happens, it's a risky pattern of thought to have, because it indicates that what you're attempting to work towards is what I would call a subjective goal. And the pattern of thinking of a subjective goal is, well, when this, then this. And the then this thing is a subjective concept. For example, when this, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
When this, I'll be happy. When this, we will be successful.
Yeah. When I earn this much money, then I'll get this. Like for me, happy, money, and success are the three things that like are the ultimate subjective goal.
Yeah. And along with that, you've got the goal to be admired, the goal to be a leader. There's quite a lot of there's a specific set of subjective goals that we've observed that drive a lot of behavior.
Yep.
And what you're doing in having that pattern of thought is you're actually making something that is an innate part of you. It is within you. But you're you are putting it at some point out in the future. I'll be happy when I have this, or I've earned this money, or I've achieved this milestone.
Mm.
All you're doing there is you're moving happiness to some point in the future, which is a moving destination.
Mm-hmm. And it's
And
not
so if you're
now.
having that experience,
It's not
that's
now.
correct. It's not now, and it will
Like, and
never be now
that's kind
because
of
you're
hard.
always putting it out there.
That's brutal, isn't it? When you think about it. So if you have a subjective goal in the future to be successful when, happy when, all of these healthy when, you're immediately creating this box today that I cannot be, full stop, cannot be happy, successful, healthy, in control, because it can't possibly happen until, and so then why try?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's actually can be even worse because you can be creating the opposite right now.
Hmm.
I'll be happy when I da 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 da. I'm therefore creating not happy now because I've moved happiness out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, um, that's the first thing. Recognize that whatever reality you're experiencing, you are creating it somehow. You're saying yes to it, intentionally or unintentionally. You're creating it, and that's the first step. If you can take that step, then you'll be able to get support to look at and think about that differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's just a really, like, to me, that's a really powerful point, is just simply to understand that you can bring it back to now, and you are in control of that. It may not always feel like it. And there is a long list of things that I could give you as to why I wouldn't have believed that in the past. But I absolutely love that. I think that's probably a nice place for us to finish. And
Mm.
hopefully I'll be able to drag you in for round two, because there are so many topics that we have not covered off.
Mm.
Um, and
Mike,
I'd
really,
encourage,
really happy to, and yeah,
yeah,
no problem.
I love that. Thank you. I'd encourage
Mm.
anyone, if anyone is watching these as well, and there are topics that people are like, but what about this? They can absolutely reach out to me, reach out to Mike. And I'm just dobbing you in, Mike. You're getting that whether you want it or not.
That's okay.
To ask those questions, whether we cover it off in another video or whether you just want to talk something through and sort of challenge any of the topics that we've raised today, would
Mm.
absolutely love to do that if anyone wants to.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely. And mate,
With
thanks
that,
for the chat.
oh, most welcome, Matt. I'm going to ask you though, Mike, if people do want to, like, I'm going to be posting this on my LinkedIn and all sorts, so I'm sure people will find me. How do people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
So if you Google Mike Irving or if you Google advanced business abilities, you will find me, and I'll make sure that we also link our links to the videos when they get shared. So that'll be easy. No problems at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Looking forward to it, mate.
Thanks, mate.
All right.
All right.
I will stop the record. Stop